Welcome to The Difference. Today we wind up our trilogy of Jim Wild telling us the story of the incredible life together he shared with Tony and what happens next. So listen in.
You are listening to The Difference, a presentation from The Hour, a 54-year ministry. Steve, first we started on radio, then went to television, then we went streaming online. So at Our Stream, you can watch our programming from all those years. So it's at thehour.org. And now, here we are. Steve, third time's the charm.
Yeah.
Here we are. We're back at the Institute for Southern Storytelling. We're continuing this conversation with Jim. If you haven't watched the first two or listened to the first two, please check that out. Because when we talk about a difference story, this is full of people who are being different.
In so many ways, it's unless you hear it, you just can't understand how true that is. So I can't wait for this third episode. You know, in my ministry, I've known a lot of people, and I can honestly tell you that there are very few people who are as genuine, who are as just pure-hearted. Not that he's perfect, but that he's just such a good guy who has every reason not to be.
And they're also, his story is inspiring, and there's going to be a way that you can help connect with the legacy here of Tony and her light. So
which
stay
is
tuned
what
for
we
that.
want to do, is to help you be a part of making the difference.
Absolutely. Here we go, part 3.
So I guess it was a it was a long few hours, and they told me that it would be, you know, there's always a risk for surgery, but certainly in that particular surgery, the risk is of having a stroke during the procedure, and they have no way of knowing until the person wakes up that everything is good and nothing has happened. So those were some nervous hours and lots of prayers, and so finally, and Eddie Spencer was there with me during that time, as well as my brother and others, and so finally that night about, I guess, 8:30, when I met with the doctor, and he said, well, it'll be a little while before she wakes up. And you can imagine how exhausted I was physically, emotionally, and in every way. And I was staying next door at the Brent House of the Ochsner Hospital. So I decided, well, I needed to go get some rest. So it was about 11:30, and I got in bed. And I was so tired, I went to sleep fairly quickly. And all I can remember is just seemed like a dream. I was hearing this ringing, and I realized as I woke up, it was my phone ringing. Just as I answered it, it hung up, but it was a Louisiana number, so I immediately called it back. And a nurse answered, and she says, hang on a second. And I heard this little weak, squeaky voice say, hey, it's me. And I said, oh, my gosh. She says, I'm fine. I said,
wow.
I was just so.
You were awake then,
I
weren't
was
you?
awake in tears of joy, and just to hear my sweet girl's voice. And it was just such an awesome feeling. And so I went back to sleep, and I woke up early, couldn't wait to see her. And so I ran over there, got in about 7:30, and of course she's supposed to be NPO, no food or drink. And I walk in, and she's eating eggs and bacon and a biscuit, and I looked at her and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, they brought it to me." I said, "Okay, so you know better." But she just grinned, and I couldn't help but grin with her. But I said, "Well, how do you feel?" She said, "I feel better than I felt in 10 years. I think I'm going to start running again." I said,
Of
"What?
course.
You're going to start what?" She said, "I think I'm going to start running again." I said, "Well, okay, one step at a time." And,
Strong, fierce, and
yeah,
optimistic
yeah,
right there.
yeah, exactly. So sure enough, 4 months after her surgery, she ran her first 5K. And over the next 3 years, she went on to run many 5 and 10Ks, but she also ran 13 half marathons and 2 full marathons. In every race, she would write her donor's name on her wrist. And while we never had the privilege or the opportunity to meet the donor's family, we did find out some information about her. She was an Asian exchange student in Baton Rouge at LSU in her 20s, and she was a victim of a head trauma from a pedestrian hit and run.
Oh.
And so,
Oh, wow.
And of all things, you know, Baton Rouge, even as large as it is, didn't have the facility to handle that, and they airlifted her to Ochsner. Excuse me. And so we got the perfect heart at the perfect time. And literally, the heart went from this young lady in her body into Tony. And I can truthfully say that Tony never had any more heart issues. None. She came back bolder and stronger, more energized, and certainly had an appreciation for the gift of life that was just amazing. And so we thought life was again happily ever after.
Well, and to stop you a minute, but she became a spokesperson.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
That's where you were headed.
That's where I was going.
Well, and I thought you were going to say that the donor had been a runner.
May have.
And I remember Louis Grizzard talked about they replaced a valve in his heart with one from a pig, and he said his heart worked fine after that, but he would just tear up every time he passed a barbecue joint. So transplants and things affect us in different ways. So. But how wonderful that I mean, just did you say 4 months after the transplant she ran a 5K? That's incredible.
4 months.
Which most people are dealing with rejection and the drugs and all
Yes.
the side effects of the transplant.
Yeah, and I would say that we got the prayer answered very literally, because it was the perfect heart. She never had an issue with any of her rejection meds. Matter of fact, it got to the point where she was taking minimal medication.
Wow.
And, we knew others that had gone through not had that experience, had issues finding the balance with the medications. Some went through rejection. Others went through different issues. And one of her closest there were 3 girls that transplanted that summer that became dear friends, and sadly, Jamie Napolitano was one of them, and then Bethany Gibson was the other one. Sadly, Bethany got pregnant a few years later and didn't survive after the pregnancy, due to the issues with all of the complications that come with pregnancy, as well as the antibodies and all of that.
Yeah.
And that was a real shock and a wake-up call to realize just how lucky, how blessed we had been. And Jamie's done extremely well, and that's a whole nother podcast story about the relationship they have with her donor, because they have become extended family. And I've gotten to the privilege Tony and I had to go to the Cleveland Transplant Olympic Games and meet her donor, her donor's parents. And he was a young man, and sadly took his own life. Had a bright future, great athlete, and young African American guy. And Jamie now carries his heart, and so that's very cool. But yeah, we just Tony healed quickly. Um, she was a spokesperson in 2012, a national spokesperson for the Go Red for Women campaign for the American Heart Association, and got to go with 11 other women to New York. And, there was a big, uh, launch, if you will, for heart awareness. And they got to ring the bell at the stock exchange, and Macy's had a big event for them. And these women, if you ever want to Google Toni Wild Heart Story, you can see some of the professional videos recorded by the American Heart Association. And she tells her story in her own words. And obviously, it doesn't include the last chapter, but it does include up to that point. And so we thought that, again, life would go on. And then lo and behold, I had triple bypass surgery in 2013. And let me tell you guys out there, if you ever have your wife have something like my wife had, and then you have something, just know you get cut no slack. Let me tell you, buddy, she was like, "What the heck are you? Get out of bed. Let's get going. What do you just had a little heart bypass. I've had
3
a heart
months to run your
transplant."
5K.
Yeah. Well, I didn't quite respond as well as she did, and but she stuck by me through my recovery, and then we continued on with life. And through it all, it's been we did great. And we just, again, we thought, well, it's life, have happily ever after. And then we hit 2020. And so 2020 rolled around, and we were going to Ochsner for her routine checkup. And her transplant coordinator, who was another one of those special people.
In 2020, there was no routine.
No routine in 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all know what 2020 brought with COVID. And so we went down to do these tests, and Tony's transplant coordinator came in, and she said, "Everything looks good with your heart, but there's a spot that we need to look at, and so we're going to recommend you go see a gynecological oncologist." And over the years, Toni had continued to do regular checkups with her OBGYN, and she had posed the question, should I get a hysterectomy? And they said, no, we think you're fine. We're doing regular checkups. Everything always looks good. We'll just keep an eye on it. Well, unbeknownst to anybody, Toni was what is called, there's a genetic component called the BRCA gene. It's BRCA. And if you're BRCA positive, you have a higher likelihood or propensity to have ovarian cancer if you've had breast cancer. And certainly Toni's family history was not a good, family history. Her aunt died of some type of cervical cancer. Both of her first cousins have had breast cancer. And so, unfortunately, when Toni initially in 1992 was first diagnosed, I don't think the BRCA testing even existed. It was early and new the second time, but nobody had ever suggested she have it tested. Well, they tested her, and she was BRCA positive. And so the spot was malignant, and they did a hysterectomy, and of course did additional chemo, which meant she lost her hair. I can't remember how many times over the course of our time together, but she lost her hair multiple times, and it always came back different. And she had 2 wigs, and she had names for both of her wigs, and she was very funny about all of that. And even one time actually let me shave her head for her. And,
Oh, wow.
And so it was
How humbling.
Yeah, very, very very humbling, but she was just always looked at the positive of everything, and so um, I can't repeat what she said when we found out the results of that test, and but obviously, as a medical professional, she understood the severity of that, and but she immediately pivoted once again. Says, "Let's do it. Let's get it done." She's old school in her way of thinking. In that, she always says, "Let's get everything out first, and then let's treat with chemo." And of course, oftentimes in today's world, they want to treat with chemo first and then see where you are. And so there were some long conversations with her physician, and finally, at first, because of they felt like they had it. They did the chemo. She became cancer free, and we had 18 months of cancer free, good reports, and again, life was really good. And then at that point in time, at 18 months, the cancer was discovered in her liver. And you know, we both agreed. She said, "Look, I don't want any pity. I don't want. I want to live." And we both made a commitment to one another that we were both going to live. We were going to live one day at a time, and we were going to cherish every single day. And we weren't going to regret yesterday or look back, but we were going to always focus on the present, the now. And I think we did a really good job of that. And the cancer came back with pretty good vengeance. Initially, she had convinced her doctor to do a procedure and sort of take out part of the liver uh, to remove the cancer. And they felt like that was a good option because there was no evidence anywhere else of cancer. But when they began the surgery, he observed tissue that was suspicious in her omentum area, and so in the diaphragm area, and so he aborted the surgery, and certainly that was a huge letdown and disappointment. And but we went through many treatments, and in typical Tony fashion, while she would be getting treatments, she wanted to bring happiness to the other patients in the unit. And she baked cookies, and we would prepare before every trip, and she would do something. We found out they wouldn't allow us to give out cookies, and I understand, due to the potential liability, but the nurses sure enjoyed them. And so we would go to the various nursing break areas or the nursing stations, and we would share cookies with them. And I think I probably got this is a really cool part of the story, but you know, when Tony got sick this last time, she told me one day, she said, "Jim, there's a song that I keep hearing in the middle of the night when I wake up." She would leave K-Love on all the time, and she just said, "There's this one song that keeps coming on that just speaks to me. She just really speaks to me." And I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah." And so I had this brainstorm idea of, after she shared with me that this song by Josh Baldwin, Evidence, and you need to go listen to the song or look up the lyrics, but it has to do with this evidence of God's presence in your life, and it's all around, and if you just look around, you'll see that evidence. Um, and I think Tony became very retrospect in looking back and recognizing how God had been there all along, and he had walked with her through these difficult moments all along the journey. And it was it was just a very important message that meant so much to her, but she also wanted to share that about herself so that others would be given
Right.
hope.
Yeah.
And so I had this crazy idea. What if I called Josh Baldwin, and the day that she rings the bell, I have him FaceTime her and sing that song personally? And so I found his publisher, I emailed his person, and I knew it was a long shot, but lo and behold, I got a response back, said, yeah, Josh would be willing to do that. The only problem is he's traveling, so he's already videotaped him singing the song to Tony, and, but probably not going to be able to FaceTime. Well, I thanked them. I got the video. I had it all ready, and Tony finishes her chemo treatment, and all of a sudden my phone is ringing, and it's a Tennessee area code. I'm going, no, this is not happening. So I answer it. Sure enough, it's Josh Baldwin live, and I said, oh man, this is awesome. And so I handed the phone to Tony, and Tony just could not believe it. And she didn't even know he had done the song. And so she's in tears talking to him and just saying, wow, I'm just blown away. And so they finished the conversation. We go around, all nurses gather, and I told Tony, you're going to ring the bell 3 times because you've not beaten cancer once or twice. You've now beat it 3 times. So I said, as she gets ready to ring the bell, I said, but there's one more thing before you ring the bell. And I opened up and played the song, and he addresses Tony very personally. And he's sitting on his balcony at the beach, and he has his guitar, and he sings the song Evidence directly to her. And then he closes by encouraging her. And it's interesting. I called Josh after Tony passed away, and he said, well, I just have to tell you that I used her in a podcast of my own recently, because her story, because of the impact it had for her, it had such an impact back on me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so
The
that was
theme that emerges this whole time. The
Yeah, strong-
reciprocity and the
Yep.
strong bonds and the
Yep.
interweaving.
Yep, it's truly God has been good. And just in closing, I would just say, shortly before Tony passed away, we prayed for the miracle. And while we may not have gotten the miracle this side of heaven, Tony looked at me one day. She said, Jim, I've already gotten several miracles. And I said, you have, Tony. And God's been good, and He is. So my message to anyone out there listening was, no matter how bad things get, there's always a loving God who walks beside us each and every step of the journey. And He never forsakes us. He knows us by name, and He loves us deeply. So take
So
heart
incredible.
and have hope.
And I just want to leave with one last thing. You didn't leave it there. You've established a special
Yes.
trust and fund in Tony's memory called Tony's Light. Tell us a little bit about that if
Sure.
people feel called to be a part of that.
Sure, I appreciate you bringing that up. Yes, before Tony died, I said, Tony, I want your life to live on. You've been such an incredible light, and your ministry to so many people has been so impactful. I want that impact to go on in perpetuity, long after you and I both are gone. And I said, I think what I'm going to do, we've been blessed, and I said, you've got an insurance policy, and I'm going to take that money and I'm going to open a fund at the Hattiesburg or Greater Pine Belt Community Foundation. And I've named it Tony's Light. And I said, how do you feel about that? She says, I love that idea. So we established this fund. It's for the Pine Belt area for women going through breast cancer, ovarian cancer, or heart transplant. And the fund will generate income, hopefully in perpetuity, to provide help for medical expenses, travel, whatever someone going through those situations might need. And everybody that receives help will receive a copy of Tony's story, and know that this was one that went before them, and she lived her life strong, fiercely, and optimistically. And I'm just so grateful for her and the many things she taught me about living a life and living it well.
Well, she prayed for the right heart, and she obviously had the right heart.
Yep.
And I will say, as we close, your devotion and love is, just so inspirational. Being there as part of the church, watching them surround you guys, watching the way y'all navigated it, watching your loving, thoughtful, caring support. I mean, you found your soulmate.
No
question. She found her soulmate.
Yep.
Both of your hearts were healed in so many ways, and you shared that healing with so many people in your life together, and the way she finished so well, and the way you loved her so graciously through it. So,
and that dog that she loved so much never could have gotten Josh to call and give her a song. So well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
Yes, and thank you both, Anthony. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you having me on, and I hope that what I've shared will help someone.
We know it will.
Yeah.
Well, the Institute for Southern Storytelling,
exactly.
where we film these episodes. Sometimes stories are tragic. Sometimes stories have perfect endings. Sometimes they don't. But what powerful stories we've heard in this series of 3 podcasts here with Jim. I'm just
finding out that you really can't clearly say happily ever after, clearly good, clearly bad. It's so inextricably woven together that you can't have the wonderful without the terrible.
Right. And the miracles happening all along.
Well, and it's kind of like a book I read one time by Gerald Setzer, A Grace Disguised. Sometimes we have to let the darkness come in, and for it to go totally dark before we can see the sun rise again. But the darkness expands our capacity for grief, but it also expands our capacity for joy on the other side.
Yeah.
Wow. I think that's as perfect a place to wind up as
we'll
we
just
can
take
wind
the offer
up.
now, and then
Exactly.
we'll.
We do ask you to check out Tony's Light if you'd like to give to that, or talk about needs you have. Look at the information that we'll share with you that'll guide you there. Thank you for listening. Jim, thank you for your gracious sharing.
Thank you both.
And as always, hey, live well.
You've been listening to The Difference, a presentation of The Hour. The Difference is made in conjunction with and partnership with the Institute for Southern Storytelling at Mississippi College. To find out more about the Institute and ways that we are partnering and mentoring young lives through storytelling, filmmaking, and more, visit us at southernstorytelling.mc.edu. And for more resources from The Hour and from The Difference, check us out at our Hour Stream platform with the streaming content at thehour.org. I'm Anthony Thaxton. Thanks for joining us.